Breaking news, a surprise resignation in Congress tonight. Republican Congressman Trent Franks of Arizona calling it quits. In a statement, he explains it this way, quote, "I have recently learned that the Ethics Committee is reviewing an inquiry regarding my discussion of surrogacy with two previous female subordinates, making each feel uncomfortable. I deeply regret that my decision of this option and process in the workplace caused distress." Surrogacy, the House Ethics Committee says it is investigating this. Sunlen Sarfati is out front now. So Sunlen, this is really surprising and a really stunning statement. What more are you learning?
Yeah, it certainly is, Kate, and I have to preface this all that we are still learning many details by the hour. We still clearly don't have the full story yet. What we do know is, yes, the congressman is resigning. At least part of it at this point seems to center around a conversation that he had with at least two female staffers in his office about surrogacy. Now, he released a statement just in the last hour denying any sort of wrongdoing. He says he never physically intimidated, coerced, or had any attempted to have any sexual contact with any members of his staff. And then he goes on to explain that he and his wife have long struggled with infertility, and that's something that potentially could have come up in conversations about surrogacy within his office. And he says, I certainly didn't mean to make anyone feel uncomfortable. That said, the Ethics Committee in the House was moving on an investigation with him. They released a statement moments before saying that they were looking to determine whether Representative Trent Franks engaged in contact that constitutes sexual harassment and or retaliation for opposing sexual harassment. And notable that tonight, just a few minutes ago, we heard from Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. He calls these allegations credible in a statement, and he says he advised Franks to resign last week after finding the allegations to be serious and requiring action. So I think we can all say there's a lot more we have to learn about this incident, but just remarkable for the fact that this is also, of course, happening the same day that we saw Senator Franken resign, and the same week where we saw Congressman John Conyers resign.
Yeah, Paul Ryan and Trent Franks seeming to paint somewhat different pictures in their statements that they're putting out tonight. Sunlen, thanks so much. Out front now, Republican Congresswoman Mia Love of Utah. Congresswoman, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What is your reaction to this news about Congressman Franks?
I think it's disheartening. I mean, as we hear about all of these situations, you know, every single one is different. I hope that people are given the ability to have due process, but, you know, there's a culture that has to change, not just in Washington, but everywhere. I mean, we can talk about these different situations, but we have got to start getting comfortable having uncomfortable conversations in the workplace and at home, and talking about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, and stop this behavior from happening. There's just way too much, and it's a culture that's been going on for way too long.
Do you think he made the right choice?
I think that anyone who feels like they've done something wrong should voluntarily resign. I really do. And I think that members of Congress should hold themselves to a higher standard. You know, it's one thing, we're out there, we're talking about policy, we're talking about what's good for America. And I think that we need to be examples of appropriate behavior at the very least. I mean, to me, that's a very low bar. So as far as I'm concerned, if anybody feels like they've done something wrong, they should voluntarily resign instead of waiting for a situation to come up where it would potentially hurt the institution and the people's house.
Well, and that actually raises some important questions about some other members of Congress in your party, Republicans like Blake Farenthold, a Republican from Texas. He settled a sexual harassment allegations with $84,000 of taxpayer allegations by a former staffer. $84,000 was paid out with taxpayer money for that. The House Ethics Committee announced tonight that they are investigating him too. I mean, I've heard basically no calls for him to resign. Should he?
Well, again, this is a culture of behavior, and I don't think he thinks he's done anything wrong. But the fact is, someone was paid off. And what's really frustrating to me is that the money was used. It's taxpayer dollars that was used, which is exactly why I introduced the bill, the STOP Act, which is stop taxpayer obligation to perpetrators of sexual harassment. I mean, again, this is something that to me shouldn't have been in place at all. We're using taxpayer dollars to settle these cases.
Resign?
I think that he should voluntarily resign, because I believe we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And where he may not feel like his behavior was inappropriate, obviously somebody did. Obviously people felt uncomfortable. And so I think we need to make sure we evaluate ourselves. And again, this is about getting people to take responsibility for what they do and changing the culture that's in Washington.
And Congressman, you were one of the first people to actually call for him to resign. So I just want to make sure folks are actually noting that this evening that you did. Al Franken, of course, announced his resignation today. And when announcing that he is resigning, he said this.
There is some irony in the fact that I am leaving while a man who has bragged on tape about his history of sexual assault sits in the Oval Office, and a man who has repeatedly preyed on young girls campaigns for the Senate with the full support of his party.
Congressman, do Democrats now have the upper hand, the moral high ground here?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, this is certainly going to be, again, all of these situations are so incredibly different, and we're not going to be able to analyze, litigate, judge, and sentence in a 7-minute segment on a Thursday show.
I know, but I heard you also say that exact same line to Chris Wallace about a Sunday show. So at this moment in time, do Democrats have a moral high ground? Al Franken said that he denies a lot of the allegations against him. He's out. John Conyers, he's out. Blake Farenthold, though you call for him to resign, he's in. And Roy Moore may win and join the Senate.
Moral high ground. I mean, this is not about a left-right issue. This is about what's right and what's wrong. I mean, I have 2 girls that I'm raising. So to me, this is not a left-right issue. This is about us, all of us members of Congress that have to be able to make sure that people have a voice, and we have to stop this behavior. And not just about going after individual people, but stop these things from happening in the future. Mm-hmm. So this is not a right or left issue. I'm a Republican member in the Congressional Black Caucus, and we feel the same way about, making sure that we're protecting the rights of women. So, and anyone, by the way, in the workplace who feels like they've been harassed or who are uncomfortable.
Look, Congressman, I hear you, but unfortunately, this is looked through from a political lens when it involves any politician, which is why this is always a different situation. But you mentioned the Congressional Black Caucus. Let me ask you this. Civil rights icon John Lewis announced today that he's skipping the opening of a new civil rights museum in Mississippi this weekend because the president is going. In response to that announcement, the White House issued a statement, and this is what they said. They said that we think that these members of Congress, we find it unfortunate these members of Congress wouldn't join the president in honoring the incredible sacrifice civil rights leaders made to right the injustices in our history. What's your reaction to this, considering that John Lewis is one of those civil rights leaders?
Well, I have a lot of respect for John Lewis. I know him as a great man who comes to me every day and says hello and asks me how my children are. I mean, we may not have the same views on every single policy, but I know that he cares about people and he feels very deeply about this issue. But I think if anybody should be going to civil rights museums and to learn about the suffering and I would say the triumph of Black Americans, it should be the White House. And I think that we should welcome that type of participation. But then again, these are my opinions, and everyone is entitled to how they feel. And I'm not going to tell Congressman John Lewis how to behave. He's really well respected.
Well, what do you make of that White House statement, though? Do you think they don't understand that John Lewis has fought for civil rights and is a civil rights leader?
I think they understand that, and I think it's right for them, for the White House to go. I think they should be going to these events.
Congresswoman, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Out front next.